2001 to 2005, leased the Hot Spring, Malvern area. And we have a home over in Butterfield that's rented right now. Praise God. I am a ordained minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. My ordination was recognized back in August of 2010. I went through a 4-year process with the Commission on Ministry. And it was a good process, I have to admit. I wasn't grueling or anything, but we surely did have to work hard. Everybody on my committee did too, so I'm thankful for that. I was asked by Everett if I would be available some Sunday, and this seemed like a perfect Sunday. And so we're going to look at some things this morning. One story is a current, this age story. One story is a very old story, maybe centuries old, we're not sure. And one story is from the New Testament, that time frame. And the person that wrote it may have wrote it quite a while after it happened. But anyway, we're going to look at those 3 stories. And I like stories. I like stories because they open up communication between 2 people. If you hear a story and there's something that just clicks with you, that story then means something, and the person telling it means something. And so you can have even a relationship of someone that's telling a story on television, and think about what they are saying about what the characters did in that story. Well, the first story is about the Costa Columbia. I don't know if you know what that is, but the Costa Columbia was one of the largest ships sailing between the Italian, on the Italian coastline and between the islands that are there. And it was really swanky. I would say it was probably as fancy as some of the big cruise lines that sail across the oceans, there was a problem back 4 years ago, I guess it was, 3 years ago. The captain of the ship got too close to the coast, trying to show off the beautiful, details of the coastline, and he ran aground. Now, running aground doesn't mean a ship sinks necessarily. Sometimes they just pull it off, the sand or whatever it hit, and it's fine. Well, he couldn't believe that he was aground, so he kept going. He ordered them to turn the engines on higher. Well, that's kind of stupid. But anyway, we won't talk about the captain after this. But so the ship actually not only ran aground, but flipped almost 90 degrees. I think it was 73 degrees or something like that. So it's leaning like this. Everything, all the tables, all the stuff on the tables, all the people, all go sliding down, against the walls inside the ship. And unfortunately, there was a group of people on the decks of the side because that's what they were doing. They were out there watching the coastline as they went along. So 30-something people died because they drowned on the railing. They couldn't get loose from the ship and all that was coming up on the ship. And some people really got hurt. But I turned on the television a couple of weeks ago, and there was a Nova. I'm a Nova junkie. When Nova comes on, I want to see what they're talking about. And so it was about the Costa Columbia. And I thought, well, that was a long time ago. Why do we care about the Costa Columbia now? Well, it turns out they were raising the Costa Columbia out of the ocean, off of the floor of the ocean, and they were going to put it on a big, huge platform and take it off. Well, it turns out that that did not make a bunch of people happy. The cruise line company said, we can't afford to have that race. You know, the people on the coast, they said, our country can't afford Italy, we can't afford to raise that. You know, and they had this big fight. And they told about the fight in this program. Turns out, you know why they raised the Costa Columbia? You know what the final reason that everybody listened to was? It's a beautiful coastline. Beautiful. And all of the stuff inside the ship was going to start rotting. And all the fuel inside the ballasts was going to start leaking. And pretty soon, this beautiful coastline that's been about the same look for the last 3,000 or 4,000 years was going to change dramatically. So they went ahead with the raising. And they did it. Hallelujah. One company said, well, we can saw it apart and take it away in pieces. And everybody said, well, wait a minute, all this stuff's going to pour out. And you cut down, make slices out of it. You can't do that. So they went to the guy who was a planner, a real famous person for doing strange things, great engineer. And he said, instead of $9 million to slice it up and haul it away, it's going to be about $300 million. But we can do it. So the people decided to do it. There was a lot of blame going on in that story. You know, why didn't the captain do different? Why didn't the crew do different? Why didn't the Coast Guard do different? Why didn't, you know, all of these blame games going on. But it turns out that what really needed to be done, they stopped the whole process of the investigation to raise it because time was of the essence. They said, it's time to stop the blame game and it's time to start the restoring recovery. So, I was watching this and I just thought of the spiritual part of the story. The spiritual part is that when a person is down, so many times we want to find out why and how, right? Or when somebody is having a hard time, some organization is really struggling, we want to name that person. We want to find them, and we want them punished now. Right? And I thought, where in the Bible, isn't there a story someplace in the Bible like this? And it just came to me, Jonah. Jonah. Jonah is the one. That's the story we need to hear to kind of figure out what's going on in our world. And so, I'm going to look at Jonah here. Jonah, the 3rd chapter, the 4th verse, and we're going to read through to the 4th chapter, the 4th verse. And this is a fairly short book. I wanted to show you something else before I read it for you. I've got a marker here in my Bible. Everything in front of this marker, those are either history or the 5 first books of the Bible. That's what that is. This section, you find the little marker. The back section, which is almost the same size, you'll notice, is the New Testament. Those 2 parts tell us who and when. But not a whole bunch of why. Paul gets into why a little bit. A little, tiny bit. But So story is coming from that part of the Bible. So it starts here. Jonah began to go into the city, going a day's walk. And when he cried out, 40 days more, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And the people of Nineveh believed God. They proclaimed a fast, and everyone, great and small, put on sackcloth. When the news reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, removed his robe, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. Then he had a proclamation made in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, no human being or animal, no herd or flock shall taste anything. They shall not feed, nor shall they drink water. Human beings and animals shall be covered with sackcloth, and they shall cry mightily to God. All shall turn from their evil ways and from the violence that is in their hands. Who knows? God may relent and change his mind. He may turn from his fierce anger, so that we do not perish. We're on verse 10. When God saw what they did, how they turned from their evil ways, God changed his mind about the calamity that he had said he would bring upon them, and he did not do it. The next verse is really telling. But this was very displeasing to Jonah, and he became angry. He prayed to the Lord and said, "O Lord, is not this what I said while I was still in my own country? That is why I fled to Tarshish at the beginning, for I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and ready to relent from punishing. And now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live." So funny. And the Lord said, "Is it right for you to be angry?" Then Jonah went out of the city and sat down east of the city and made a booth for himself there. He sat under it in the shade, waiting to see what would become of the city. So, I'm going to tell kind of the rest of the story. It's kind of wordy. The rest of the story is, he sat under this dang bush that came up overnight. It gave him, shelter and shade. It's in the middle of the desert. Then, you know what he did? He just sat there and cried and carried on, because he was still angry. The next morning, that bush that had come up to shade him died. And then he got, what? Even more angry. Right? Hey, there was only this stupid bush to help me and now it's dead. This is what is the end of the story. But God said to Jonah, "Is it right for you to be angry about the bush?" And he said, "Yes, angry enough to die." Then the Lord said, "You are concerned about the bush for which you did not